wife and I moved back a few years ago. I decided to write a book about high school football. I was always a Wampus cat. I was always paying attention to what went on at home. And as I was going through news reports of Leesville, I kept seeing these other reports from Vernon that would appear periodically in the Lake Charles American Press. Started asking people in Leesville, well, what do you know about Vernon? And everyone said, man, they were good. I said, well, what was their record? Well, don't know. Does anyone have a yearbook? There weren't many that were made. There weren't. I think there were 2 that were ever put together in the history of the school. I decided that this needed to be documented because of what I had heard they had accomplished, and I really wanted to find out what they had accomplished.
Vernon High was perhaps the greatest high school around because we were a community. We had a faculty and a staff who insisted that kids learned. I mean, we didn't have any of this social promotion stuff. They taught, you actually learned. They insisted that you learn. Parents supported teachers, and teachers were really the folk who made the thing work. Foster was my oldest brother. He was a man of few words and short sentences. He meant what he said, and he said what he meant. He was big on action, small on talk. Tom was an exceptional coach, but he understood that he couldn't do it by himself, so he had some exceptional assistant coaches. And these guys were able to recruit kids to play on the football team. We were a small high school team. Single A was our division, and I would imagine we had about 100 guys in the high school, and probably 70 or 75 of them played on the football team.
Foster, stop me, boy. I want you to come out for the team next year. I said, I ain't going out there and play no ball. Them boys is big. I'm scared. Oh, you can do it? Come on out. Come on out. We can go and talk to your mama.
They were every bit as good as everyone had said. They were a very, very dominant football team for basically the entirety of the 60s. A slow start in 1960, but they started winning in 61 and 62. And they won 3 state championships throughout the 1960s. They had one 22-game winning streak that spanned the course of about 3 seasons. They were just very, very dominant and well respected, and they were very much the glue of the community, of the African American community in Leesville.
So the entire community got hyped up when it was football game night. In fact, when we went to play, even though the schools were not integrated at the time, our citizens packed our side of the field, but outside the gate were other citizens from Leesville. Everybody came to see us play.
I've been told, as I've been piecing this together, by kids that grew up in those days, that they used to slip over and watch them on Saturday. Only one football stadium in Leesville. The Wampus Cats would play on Friday, and then the Lions would come to Wampus Cat Stadium and play on Saturday. And they would go over there and watch them and be amazed, because the Wampus Cats never did anything like the Lions did.
When we went off to play, we weren't able to have as big a following as we had at home, but when we returned home, you knew that it was Vernon Lions coming home, because the bus driver would keep the buzzer going all the way to the school, and everybody would wake up to know that Vernon was home, and of course we won.
I really started down this path was to tell the story of integration, because when schools got integrated in the late 60s, there was trouble. Coach Thomas was a fantastically successful football coach, but he saw something much bigger happening that he said, we've got to make this community work. My wife and I drove over to Fort Worth some years ago to begin. I wanted to begin a book on integration. And I spent a long time with Coach Thomas that day, and that was the first time I ever heard about Carl Howard.
Carl was an unusually gifted athlete despite his handicap.
We played Paul Bro out of Lafayette. It was a big school. We singly played Paul Bro. When we drove up, we go to the school. When we drove up in a bus, they had a rope around my neck. And we pulled up the car. Thomas Joe said, "Carl, they got a rope around your neck," and had a dummy built with one hand like me. Because we had played them that previous year up here. And we gave them a fit right over there in the stadium. It was a pretty big team. So when we went down there, they called themselves ready for me. We gonna break that other arm. I mean, everybody standing outside just waiting. And when I come off the bus, they said, there he is. We gonna break that other arm. I laughed. I just said, oh man. Tommy Joe said, come on, Carl. Don't worry about that. We goes on in. Time for the game, we goes with the game. Man, they kicked that ball off. Hello. I introduced Carl Howard to him. I broke it, took it almost to the house. And we whooped him so bad, whooped him about 4 or 5 touchdowns. By four. Yeah, by four. Beat him by 4. I don't remember the score, but we beat him pretty bad.
And he piled up untold numbers of yards. What statisticians kept track of more in those days were touchdowns. They didn't really track, like today we hear about 1,000-yard rushers. They didn't really attribute that much in the news in those days. But Carl was a starter. He was a 4-year starter. He normally led Southwest Louisiana, what they call the Southwest Louisiana Negro League. He normally led them in scoring. Not only did he run the ball, he caught the ball. They threw him passes with Will Norman. He caught them.
Powerful, quick, fast, and he could really make it happen on the football field.
I ran a play by 80 yards, 75, 80 yards. And the official called running too fast. Can you imagine running too fast? Not outside now, running too fast, and they called a touchdown back. And the principal got mad because he knew you shouldn't have did this. We come right back and run the same play, and I scored again. But I had a good career, and I never would have achieved that without those Coach Thomas.
Look, I was in first grade when the school's integrated. It was what I knew growing up. My father was a schools guy. In fact, my father was a curriculum advisor at the time, and he got to school the day integration was going to happen. He didn't even know, and they told him, they said, Creighton, the buses are at Vernon. You're going to go help get them. And they kind of did it by surprise. The decision was made the previous week. They told the kids at school, y'all all wear your best clothes. We're taking pictures on Monday. And so the kids and the families had no idea this was coming. It was the first Monday in November of 1969, and they got there, and they loaded them all on buses, and they sent them over to Leesville. And so the first, as you can imagine, that was tumultuous.
In 1972, I was an 11th grader at Leesville High School. This was a turbulent time in most schools, as school administrators and teachers dealt with issues and conflicts that accompanied integration. Assistant Principal Foster Thomas was instrumental in creating a disciplined and orderly school environment where teachers could teach and students could learn. Coach Thomas was fair, consistent, and made all students feel valued. Expectations were communicated, and all students were held accountable for their actions. Coach Thomas was a leader who listened to what students had to say, and he earned our trust and respect. Coach Thomas was a highly visible administrator who cared for each of his students. He taught us the importance of getting along with everyone. Years later, I returned to Leesville High School as a classroom teacher. Coach Thomas became my mentor and encouraged me to become a school administrator. Coach Thomas taught me to always have the best interests of students in mind when making decisions. Coach Thomas set the example of a school leader who paid attention to details, was always prepared, inspired others, and recognized success. The legacy Foster Thomas left behind, that of excellence, is ever present to this day at Leesville High School.
Long way to go in this country, but there are pockets of excellence where things happen, and Leesville was one of those pockets of excellence. And it was Foster Thomas, and it was his principal, it was the people at the school board office, it was the teachers that came from Vernon and the teachers that were at Leesville who said, we're not going to lose this town, and we're going to make it work. And that's the story that this needs to, I would say, launch, so people can understand that.
Touched many, many lives in that capacity as a football coach. He brought a winning tradition to Vernon High School. I think he would be humbly proud. He was not one of these guys that liked a lot of attention. But I think to have received such a recognition, I think he would be very proud of that.
They knew him. This tall man, looked like a bear, a man of character. And yes, he was their guy, He was everybody's guy. He was my assistant principal. He was revered and loved. This was a story about a community that was, I would say, accidentally erased. I hope it'll give a lot of people who don't know this story time to reflect and to realize that it happened, and then to be curious about how we got here.